Hello, everyone. It's Kathleen at Kathleen Elise and Level Up Your English with at Kathleen Elise. So I hope that you have had a great weekend and that you're ready to just start your week off great. And I'm proud of you for coming here live to give yourself a great injection of information to really help you actually level up your English this week. So today we're going to talk about what I mean when I refer to the sounds of English. So before we get into that, though, don't forget to subscribe to the station. Let me just, sorry, things seem a little dim. I don't know if it's just my computer. So sorry about that. Subscribe to the channel, and so that you don't miss anything, you get notified of the new posts and when the lives are happening. So, because I'd hate to have you miss out on this information that's just really going to help you out. There's simple things that make a huge difference. So here we go. So again, what do I mean when I talk about the sounds of English? So many of you, I'm sorry, this glare on my glasses is driving me crazy. So you've heard me talk about, or maybe you haven't. So if this is your first time here, let me talk about my philosophy. So my philosophy is built around the natural progression of how we learn language and what we use it for. So the very first thing we learn is speaking English, or our language is speaking. The next thing we do is writing. So the second pillar of my 4 pillars of 360-degree fluency in English is writing English. The third pillar that we deal with is business English, because that's its own little extremely important subset of the language of English. And then the final pillar is social English, because we deal differently in our social interactions versus our business interactions. And it's an important distinction for success in either one. So when I talk about the sounds of English, what you need to remember, and this whole concept is going to completely free up your mind and your body of all the pressure and the stress that comes with learning English, learning a language, but particularly English. And the reason it releases the stress is that people are so caught up in and worried about not being able to learn all of the rules of English, all of the grammar, all of the exceptions, that you just put so much pressure on yourself to get it right that you're putting your focus and all of your energy in the wrong area. So a quick note about the English language. The reason it has so many rules and so many exceptions to the rules is that English has been essentially pieced together from many other languages, and those languages imposed either they imposed their rules, their vocabulary, their sounds on the English, or they were just adopted because we had, regular dealings with these other languages, and we just sort of, as a way to communicate, we just sort of adopted it. So, and things, we didn't change things to suit our original rules. So keep that in mind. Don't get frustrated with all of the complexities of English, understand that these complexities are not there to make your life miserable. They were adopted because they were valuable at the time when they entered the language. And so, as we're going to be learning, languages are they're malleable. They're meant to change along with the need of the time, the communications needs at the time, that they enter into the language. So I'm trying to think. So the word skirt, for example, that is that comes from, I think it's Swedish, or a language in that area of the world. So those rules are different than English rules. So if that word had developed solely within the confines of the English of people who were developing the language, then it would probably come out differently. It would probably be spelled differently. We might have the same sounds, but it would probably be spelled differently. So I'm getting ahead of myself here. Therefore, I'm getting ahead of you. So I don't want to confuse you. So language is all about producing sounds. The first thing you learn as an infant to communicate is to make sounds. The sounds that you make and the sounds that you send out to the person in front of you, usually your parent or a family member, the sounds that you make mean something to you, and you're trying to have that person in front of you understand what you want or what you're trying to say. So even as an infant, we're trying to communicate, okay? And it's not just people that communicate, animals communicate, our bodies communicate, our cells and hormones and everything send messages to our brain that then triggers a certain action. That's all communication. That doesn't happen to be speaking because our brain can't speak. The brain allows us to speak. The brain allows animals to make noises, but humans are the ones with the actual words. Okay, so the words that we're making, the words that we're saying, I should say, are made up of different sounds. And the way we combine those sounds, not only the order in which we place them, but the emphasis we place on certain sounds within that word, or the volume that we produce either on the word itself in a string of different words or sounds, or whether we speak loudly or softly, or whether we speak quickly or slowly, whether the inflections that we put, the tones that we put into the sounds, all communicate a specific message. So as each community, each people, depending on the size of your community. So each language has many different dialects. Well, that is just the language developing certain sounds that this group of people within the bigger society are making to communicate the same message. So a language of a people is a variation, a combination of sounds that have been given a certain meaning, and everybody sort of agrees just by using it that this sound means the same thing wherever you go. Some people might have their own variation on that sound, but it's still similar enough. It's still standard enough throughout the wider community where people over here who might make a different variation on that sound can still understand the people over here, because it's just a variation on the sound. So if you keep that in mind, then what you're going to, I hope, understand is that your community came up with these particular set of sounds and a particular way of making those sounds. Okay, and you've all agreed that this is how, that these things, these sounds, this combination, these rules, this structure all mean certain things, and this is how you get what's in your head, what's in your heart outside to the world to communicate your message. So you've all created one way of doing it. Someone over here has created a different way of doing the same thing. So you're both coming to the same solution, but approaching it from different aspects. Okay? From the view of the world that you've developed as a community because of what you've gone through and what you've needed. Another community needed different things, or so things develop differently. And so if you can just think of it as creating sounds, reproducing sounds, doing what you need to do with your jaw, with your tongue, with the shape of your mouth, with the placement of your voice, whether you move your vocal cords or not, if you can just get yourself to think of recreating the sounds of the language that you're trying to learn, do that first, because that's how we learned it in the first place. First thing we did was to make sounds, okay, and learn how to use those sounds to get our message across. So that is one of the most important things you can ever learn about learning a language. And yeah, it's just going to free you up and take that burden off of you, that immense pressure of all of the preconceived ideas that you have. And I'd say the majority of people the world over have about learning English. So keep that in mind. I literally could talk about this all day. So I have to rein myself in, because I want to make sure that we keep this within a half an hour, so that you can still have some time to, if you're on your lunch break or a dinner break, or you just put the kids to bed and you trying to get a little bit of learning in, that it's not going to take up too much of your time from the rest of your the other responsibilities in the rest of your life. So I'm gonna have to do this for a second. Yeah, so okay, so we just went over that. So the second point here that is going to help you out considerably, and what I refer to a lot with the sounds of English, is the 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 sounds of the English language are created by doing certain things with your mouth. Like I just said, your mouth, your jaw, your teeth, what your tongue is doing, where you're placing your sound. Are you putting it up in your cavity, your nasal cavities here? Are you keeping it down here? Is it in your throat? All of that stuff, each language, each people who has a language of their own, develops certain ways, certain techniques to create those sounds that help them communicate. And so with English, all of this stuff here is we're pretty tense, and we're pretty tight, and we're pretty, I always say we're ready to go, because we get things done. And I know I've said that before, but it's how American English speakers speak. And so for the various reasons that I have talked about in other places, but for the most part, because I'll just give you a brief thing, because of the way things happened when we arrived in this country. No one had ever seen, no one that we had known of had ever seen this country before. We didn't know there were people living here. We didn't know what to expect. The land was different. The climate was different. The bugs were different. We got different diseases that we had never experienced. And by we, I say anybody who first came and settled into America when it was discovered. Um, we just had so much to deal with that was so completely different. Even though there was something familiar about it, though what we thought was familiar we just was not. And so there was so much for the settlers to deal with that there wasn't time to have a leisurely chat, to be relaxed, and um, anything like that. So we learned and we developed this trait of being just get it done, figure it out fast, figure out what the problem is, figure out the solution, and get it done because your survival depends on it. And um, so we just sort of that just became ingrained in our behavior, in our as a trait. And a lot of people don't understand why we're like that, but maybe that will help you understand a little bit. So anyway, so that's why we speak quickly. That's why our our jaws are tense, our tongues are tense and moving around a lot, and quick movements. Um, we don't tend to have nasal sounds. I happen to have a lot of allergies, and you can probably tell my face looks really red today. Um, so my sinuses are constantly, filled, and that does change the sounds that I make. But it gives a different quality to the sound, but the sounds are clear and accurate and crisp, and that's generally how we speak. As you get, you know, further west or further south, that quality changes a little bit because people from the south and from the California area, the West Coast, as we say, they tend to be more relaxed because by the time we had moved out, the country had spread to those areas. First of all, the South is usually super hot and humid, and it's really hard to get anything done during certain times of the year or, you know, what have you. So that kind of forces you to slow down. Even though you have the same amount of things to get done, you find different ways to get them done under those conditions. And so we're up north where I am, we're usually freezing. So get it done quick and get inside the fire. Whereas down south, it's, oh my goodness, I got it to cool off, that sort of a thing. And, by the time people spread out to the California side of the world, or side of the United States, other things had happened, and we've learned so much and been through so much just to get out there that I think you kind of realize just how precious life is and time is, and people had been able to provide for themselves better. You weren't in complete survival mode by that time. You were in this is a new opportunity. Let's get out there and um, build our lives and create, make our fortune and enjoy our leisurely time. So, but even though those areas of the country are still slower, we still have that quick, get it done, you know, let's get going here attitude and thought process. So again, we still speak quickly. It, you know, that was a long tangent, but again, I think it's important. These lives do have a theme, but it's all about on the learning here live. And so that's an important thing to understand about the English culture, so that when you're trying to make these sounds, you can say, oh yeah, I got to speak it quickly, I've got to get better at that. And so the first thing I want you to learn, so this is the third thing, the third issue here, is that and it ties in, it's interconnected with number two, is that I lost my train of thought, excuse me. Yeah, so when you're speaking English, when you're producing the sounds of English, keep in mind you have to keep your mouth, your jaw, everything more tense and ready to move more quickly. Because if Americans hear people speaking too slowly, then they just tune out, and it's hard to focus. We always in our brains are like, oh, move it along, will you? I speak slowly for an American, and because I'm extremely thoughtful in what I say, I don't like to just blurt things out. I like to think it through. So it takes me a little longer to communicate, but I'd rather do that and be clear than just say things fast and not really put my thoughts together. So it just takes me a little longer sometimes. But compared to other cultures, I speak quickly. So again, it's all about perspective, and that's what these lives are here to give us, is perspective. So so back to the issue here. So when you're producing the sounds of English, don't focus on anything but, like, forget about your alphabet. Don't try to say, oh, that sound, if I said a or ah, don't try to think of what letter it is. Just learn the sound. Learn how to produce the sound. Learn how to recognize it by listening to it. Learn how to produce it by watching what I do and listening to the results of what's going on here. And I know you can't see someone's tongue when they're talking unless it's, pronounced, or they speak with their mouth open or something, but try to really see what's going on when someone is speaking in English to you, and listen carefully, and then try to reproduce it yourself. Okay, that's going to really help you so much. And the third thing here is, don't forget about your alphabet right now. Even if you have a master's degree in English, if you find yourself still struggling being fluid with the language, with your understanding, with your ability to think in English and communicate in English, put everything you've learned aside and go back to mastering the reproduction of the sounds of English. Because once you know your sounds and how to combine those sounds, how to use those sounds, how to produce those sounds clearly, you're going to then be able to take the next step or review the next step, which is the writing, and then things will make so much more sense to you. You won't have to struggle with, like, when you go to read, you won't have to struggle with so many things at once. You will have the sounds down, and then you take that next step of relating and connecting the sounds that you've now mastered with the physical, tangible representation of that sound on the page, which is what writing is. Okay, so forget about your alphabet. Just focus on mastering the sounds. Focus on mastering the techniques, the mouth techniques, the mouth mechanics of English, so that you can accurately reproduce English sounds. And I've said this before, if you try to use your mouth mechanics, or the techniques of producing the sounds of your language while you're trying to produce the sounds of English, they're not going to match up. Okay, so put all thoughts of how to produce sounds from your language, put them aside, get them out of there, because you're not dealing with your language, you're dealing with English. I have to do that when I'm studying my Korean and my German and my French and my Spanish. I have to remember that, the Spanish R and the French R might seem like they sound like they're the same, but they're not. There are differences, and if I try to speak a if I tried to pronounce a French word or a Spanish word using the mouth mechanics of my R's, I'm going to get both of those words wrong, and people aren't going to be able to understand me. Okay, so it's so important to get the sounds right. So my tips for doing the sounds, the best one I've found is to watch as many videos as you can, or if you're speaking with someone, live right in front of you, without staring at them if they're live, watch what they do with their mouth and with their tongue, and listen to how they say the sound. Listen to the kinds of emphasis they place either on a word or a spot in the word, because what's the word? Your syllables, when you break down the words. So syllables are words, like I said before, are made up of different sounds, okay? And those sounds are represented by letters or combinations of letters. And so if you break those down, you have your syllables. So you listen to how people stress different parts of the word, different syllables, and find out what that means. Does the change in um, accentuation, does that change the meaning of the word? Does it therefore change the word completely in the meaning of the sentence? Or does it have no effect at all? Listen to that, pay attention to all that stuff. That's all wrapped up in the sounds of English. Okay, listen to the attitude that is injected into the word by the inflection or the intonation. Because someone could say, yeah, right. Or they could say, yeah, right. Or they could say, yeah, right. And that all communicates something different. So, like I said, I could talk all day about this one part of English. So, ask me any questions that you have. I know we're coming up, and I don't want to bring us over time. Really, sorry. I get so excited. It all gets jumbled up in there, and it clogs up in my throat. I can't speak sometimes because there's so much to say. So when you have time, before you go, make sure you subscribe, because I just don't want you to miss out on any of this, and you'll get notified when you do. Oh, well, click the notification button. That's a necessary step. Subscribe, click the notification button, go back and watch any of the lives that you've missed. Because I do two every Monday, I do it at midnight, so that, I'm in the Eastern time zone, so I'm in the Massachusetts time zone. So I do it at midnight so that the people on the other side of the world from me can come and join at a time that's convenient for them. And I do it at noon so that people on this side of the world, or within a reasonable, radius, whatever, can also come. So maybe it's not lunchtime for you, but maybe it's the end of your workday, or, maybe it's the beginning of your workday or just before. So I'm just trying to make sure that everybody has a chance to come live and get their questions answered. So that's one thing. Subscribe, get notified. And then write down your questions. Keep a notebook of questions, or come back here and drop your questions in the chat, in the comments sections, I should say. If you're live, drop them in the chat. So I will go back and look at the comments and make sure that I answer the questions either right there in the comments, but more than likely during either the next live or an appropriately matched live, because it's better if you can see the response. And yes, make sure that you watch the others, because even though I'm giving the same 3 examples here, the same 3 tips, different things come out when you're talking live. And so you'll learn even more if you watch the one you missed for that day, if you can't come live twice. So anyway, my explanations always take longer than I expect. So uh, as they say, you gotta love me. So all right, I'm glad you could come. I hope you have a great day. Ask me anything and we'll make sure it gets answered. Okay. So you have a great day and we'll see you next week. Okay. Bye-bye.